You don't belong here. This seat wasn't meant for someone like you. That's what the gate agent said, out loud in front of everyone, as she ripped the boarding pass from the young black girl's hand and pointed her toward economy. She didn't lower her voice. She didn't hide her disgust. Passengers watched. No one stepped in. Some nodded. Others just looked away. And the girl? She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She stood there, silent, proud, and still holding the same first-class ticket that others used to walk right through. Only difference? Her skin, her presence, her refusal to apologize for either. This isn't just a story about flying. This is about being humiliated while staying composed, being denied while fully qualified, being seen, and still invisible. Who is she? Why didn't she fight back? And what's about to happen that no one, especially the gate agent, is prepared for? Let us know where you're watching from, what you would have done in her place. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. What happens next will flip everything upside down. Zara Bennett moved through the terminal with quiet elegance, her steps measured, unhurried, as if she had walked these halls countless times before. The terminal buzzed around her with the rhythmic chaos of travel. Suitcases rolled, voices echoed, and overhead announcements layered themselves, one on top of the other. Yet she remained centered, her boarding pass gripped lightly in one hand, and a phone in the other displaying a brief but warm message. Proud of you, sweetheart. See you soon. Love, Dad. She smiled faintly. This trip was more than just a journey. It was a homecoming, a celebration of all she had worked for. She had earned this flight, this moment. As she neared the first-class check-in counter, she took in the atmosphere. Rich wood paneling, sleek marble floors, and attendants who spoke in clipped, polished tones. Everything about the space radiated exclusivity. Zara wasn't intimidated. She had grown up surrounded by rooms like this, not because of her own wealth, but because of her father's legacy. Still, she never flaunted his name. She believed respect should be earned, not inherited. She approached the desk, offering a polite nod to the woman standing behind it. The name tag read Claudia. Claudia Harper was the sort of woman who wore her authority like perfume, subtle to some, overwhelming to others. Her hair was neatly pulled back into a severe bun, her makeup precise, and her eyes sharp, constantly scanning. When she noticed Zara, a flicker of something unreadable passed through her expression. Disinterest? Skepticism? It was subtle, but not invisible. Zara extended her boarding pass with a soft smile. Hi. First class to LA. Claudia took it, her eyes scanning the name, the seat number, the ticket class. She didn't scan the barcode. Instead, she looked back at Zara with a thin-lipped expression and said, "This lounge is reserved for full-fare first-class passengers." Zara blinked. "I am a full-fare first-class passenger." Claudia's tone didn't change, but her eyebrows rose just slightly. Must be one of the promotional upgrades then. Those aren't eligible for lounge access. Zara's posture didn't waver, but her grip on the handle of her carry-on tightened slightly. "I'm sorry, that's not correct. This ticket was booked directly through the airline's concierge service. You can check." Claudia didn't move to verify. Instead, she offered a well-practiced, condescending smile. "I've been doing this for 15 years, sweetie. Some tickets look first class, but they're not. Trust me. If you'd like to wait, there's a seating area just outside the entrance." For a split second, Zara's confidence faltered, not because she doubted herself, but because she was caught off guard. She had dealt with cold stares, coded language, and subtle pushback before, but rarely this early, rarely this blatant. She took a breath and gently retrieved her ticket from Claudia's hand. "I think I'll wait right here if that's all right," she said evenly, not moving from her place in line. Claudia's smile thinned further, but she said nothing. She turned to the next guest, an older white gentleman with a navy blazer and a Rolex watch visible beneath his cuff. "Welcome to the first-class lounge, sir. Can I get you a drink while you wait for boarding?" Her voice was warm, inviting, rehearsed. Zara stepped aside, out of a line, but not far. She pulled out her phone and opened the airline's app, double-checking her reservation details. First class. Verified. Concierge booked. Priority boarding. She knew she was right. But she also knew from experience that being right wasn't always enough. She looked up and caught Claudia glancing at her again, this time whispering something to a colleague across the counter. The colleague, a younger man with kind eyes, looked unsure, even embarrassed. But he said nothing. Minutes passed. One by one, passengers moved through the line and were ushered into the plush lounge. Zara remained where she was, her calmness now edged with something firmer, resolve. Eventually, the younger man approached her, hesitantly. "Ma'am, I can check your ticket for you." Zara smiled, grateful. "Yes, please." He scanned the code and looked at the screen. His brows lifted, almost imperceptibly. "You're cleared. First class. Full access. I'll escort you in." Before he could act, Claudia intervened. "I already checked your ticket," she said sharply. "It's one of those back-end upgrades. Not eligible." The young man looked at her, confused. "But it says, let's not clog the line," Claudia snapped. "Security will be doing their sweep shortly. I'll handle it." Zara stepped back, unwilling to cause a scene, but unwilling to retreat. She met Claudia's gaze. "I'm not asking for anything I didn't pay for." Claudia folded her arms. "You'll need to wait outside. That's all." Zara opened her mouth to respond, but then paused. Something shifted behind her eyes. Instead of pushing further, she simply nodded. "All right, I'll wait." She turned and walked slowly toward the outer seating area. But as she did, she pulled out her phone again. This time, she opened her messages and tapped a name labeled simply, "Dad." Something came up. "Can you ask the concierge team to check on the reservation?" She hit send and sat down, crossing one leg over the other, back straight, eyes calm. Claudia might have seen a quiet teenager. What she didn't see was the storm quietly taking shape behind that calm. Zara sat quietly on the leather bench just outside the first-class lounge, her phone resting in her lap as she waited, not anxiously, but with a calm that came from knowing the truth. She had every right to be here. She knew it, and deep down, Claudia probably knew it too. Yet something in Claudia's demeanor didn't speak of confusion or protocol. It spoke of control, and of a subtle satisfaction in denying access to someone who didn't fit her internal image of who belonged in that space. Across the terminal, Claudia glanced toward the seating area where Zara waited. Her jaw was tight, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the edge of the check-in desk. Passengers continued filing through, some smiling, some absorbed in their phones. But none paid much attention to the quiet tension just a few steps away. Finally, as the first-class line began to thin, Claudia stepped away from her post and approached Zara with a clipboard in one hand and her own phone in the other. She didn't sit, didn't soften her voice, didn't attempt any customer service charm. "Come with me," she said flatly. Zara looked up, her eyes calm but curious. "Is something wrong?" she asked, though the answer already simmered between them. Claudia didn't reply directly. Instead, she gestured for Zara to stand. "It's better we talk somewhere else. We've had issues recently with certain types of bookings, resale tickets, fraudulent upgrades. It's become a problem." "My ticket was booked directly through the airline," Zara replied, standing slowly. "You could have scanned it and seen that." "Scans don't always tell the whole story," Claudia said sharply, already turning to walk. "And I've seen plenty of these cases before. It's not personal. I just need to verify some things before you board." Zara followed her without a word, her heels clicking lightly against the terminal floor. As they moved through the terminal, they passed a cluster of economy passengers lining up at gate B4. Claudia led her toward a corner booth near the economy customer assistance kiosk. It wasn't a private space. In fact, it was quite public. People glanced up from their spots in line, curious about the sight of a young black woman being escorted by an employee in full uniform. A few heads turned. One woman whispered to her partner. A child tugged at their mother's sleeve and asked, "Is she in trouble?" Zara sat down at Claudia's direction, folding her hands neatly in her lap. She noticed the signage behind her, Economy Rebook and Issue Resolution. The placement wasn't subtle. Claudia remained standing, holding the boarding pass now between two fingers like it was a receipt she didn't trust. "Do you know where your ticket was purchased?" she asked. Zara raised an eyebrow. Yes, I told you. Direct booking, concierge service. And who exactly paid for it? Claudia continued, voice clipped. You? Or did someone else transfer the miles to you? Does it matter? Zara said quietly. It's a valid ticket. Actually, it does, Claudia snapped. Because people have been gaming the system. Buying seats on shady websites using points that aren't theirs. I've seen dozens of these, and they always say the same thing. I booked it directly. Zara's lips parted slightly. So now I'm part of some pattern? Claudia shrugged. I don't make assumptions. I follow patterns. And yours looks suspicious. Because I'm young? Or because I'm black? Zara asked the question plainly, not as an accusation, but as a fact that had sat in the air between them since the first glance. Claudia flinched almost imperceptibly, but recovered fast. Because it doesn't make sense, she said. People don't usually fly first-class solo at your age unless there's something else going on. I've been working here long enough to know when something's off. The words hung in the air like stale perfume. Zara exhaled slowly, still composed. She knew this was no longer about verification. This was about power. Claudia exerting hers under the guise of procedure. You could have checked the system 10 minutes ago, Zara said. Instead, you pulled me away from the line, brought me here, and now you're guessing out loud. It's not guessing, Claudia said. It's protecting the integrity of our seating system. No, Zara replied, voice low but clear. It's protecting your idea of who belongs in that system. Claudia's jaw tightened. She looked around, as if checking to see who might have heard that. A couple nearby had definitely caught it. The man glanced over, eyebrows raised, while his partner gave Zara a sympathetic glance before quickly turning back. Claudia reached for her radio. I'm going to ask our internal ticketing team to take a closer look. In the meantime, you'll need to stay here. Am I being detained? Zara asked. Is this security protocol or just your own rulebook? Claudia narrowed her eyes. No one's detaining you. But if you want to get on that plane, you'll need to wait while I confirm your ticket status. With who? Internal verification team, Claudia said quickly. They're not customer-facing, but they'll get back to me. Zara tilted her head. Or you could just scan the barcode like every other agent does and see what pops up on the screen. Claudia didn't answer. Instead, she turned and walked a few steps away, pretending to make a call, but really just scrolling through her device. Zara sat back against the chair, taking in the environment. Around her, people filtered through their own routines, coffee, carry-ons, kids, but there was an unmistakable aura of discomfort in this corner of the terminal. She could feel the weight of eyes on her, not hostile, but not helpful either. Watching, judging, waiting. She glanced down at her phone again. No reply from her father yet, but she hadn't expected one right away. He was busy, always was, but never too busy when it mattered. And this was starting to matter. Nearby, the gate agent at B4 called out boarding groups. The overhead speaker buzzed with final boarding calls. Her plane was boarding soon. She knew it. Claudia knew it too. And yet here they were. Another 5 minutes passed. Claudia returned, holding a small tablet now, her posture straight. She looked down at Zara and said, Claudia stood rigidly by the customer assistance kiosk, tablet in hand, her lips pursed in a thin, straight line. Zara remained seated, posture calm, although the tension in her shoulders betrayed the growing frustration beneath her composed surface. Her phone buzzed once in her lap, a message lighting up briefly, but she didn't reach for it. Instead, her eyes remained focused on Claudia, watching as the woman flicked through the screen of her device with what looked like purposeful slowness. Behind them, the line at Gate B4 continued to grow, the bustle of travelers moving, boarding, complaining, laughing, all part of the usual symphony of airport chaos. But here in this corner of the terminal, there was a strange, uneasy stillness. People were aware, perhaps not fully engaged, but glancing over enough to recognize that something was out of place. A black girl in sleek travel attire, clearly poised and educated, sitting quietly while a uniformed staff member hovered nearby, with the unmistakable aura of accusation cloaked in protocol. "Let me take a quick look at her ticket," came a voice from behind. It was one of the junior agents, Carlos, who had noticed the exchange from afar. He stepped forward, his scanner already in hand. If there's a barcode, I can at least verify where it was purchased. Might save us all some time. Claudia shot him a sharp look, stepping between him and Zara like a gatekeeper guarding a vault. No need, she said firmly. I already checked her profile manually. The issue isn't the barcode. It's that the name on the booking is incomplete. She says her father made the reservation, but I see no secondary contact or linked traveler information in the system. Carlos hesitated, his scanner still raised slightly. That's not uncommon with some executive tier accounts, he said cautiously. Depending on the program used, some clients opt to keep their details confidential, especially under corporate or trust tiers. Claudia scoffed, crossing her arms. Confidential is one thing. This isn't even a verified family connection. She claims her father booked it, but the profile is under someone named V. Bennett. That's not her name. Zara finally spoke, voice even and clear. Victor Bennett is my father. The account is under his name. I'm an authorized beneficiary. Claudia didn't look at her. Instead, she turned to Carlos with a smile that barely concealed her condescension. You see the problem? Anyone can claim that. These high-tier trust bookings, especially from the Bennett Circle, are notorious. They don't show the passenger's name until boarding is confirmed. Anyone with a screenshot and a surname can pretend to belong. Or, Carlos replied slowly, anyone with the actual access code and official confirmation might just be legitimate. Claudia's jaw twitched. Unless you're ready to override my verification and take full accountability, I suggest you let me handle it. Carlos looked at Zara, hesitated, then lowered the scanner. I just thought. Exactly, Claudia cut him off. You thought. And I'm following the manual. She turned back to Zara. The problem is, young lady, you're not listed on the surface level of the booking. So unless your father magically appears in this terminal, I have no way to verify you. You could access the Tier 7 booking logs, Zara said, her voice still calm. It's under Bennett Trust Priority Access. That level requires elevated clearance, but I'm sure your supervisor can retrieve it. Claudia stared at her, incredulous. You expect me to go chasing down internal logs based on what, your word? Do you know how many people claim to be part of that trust program every week? She looked around theatrically. And do you know how many actually are? Less than 10. Most of those clients are well-known, regulars. They don't send in teenagers with vague names and no ID link. Zara's eyes narrowed slightly. You didn't even ask to check my ID. Claudia blinked. The silence that followed was deafening. A couple nearby passengers had turned to look, trying not to seem obvious, but the words hung in the air like a ripple. Claudia broke the moment quickly. It wouldn't matter. Even if your ID says Zara Bennett, that doesn't mean the trust booking applies to you. People fake profiles, forge family names. If I scanned that pass and let you through, and this turned out to be a scam, it'd be on me. That's why we've got to stay strict. Bennett Trust here or not. Then scan it, Zara replied quietly. Take the risk. Or call your supervisor. You don't dictate procedure, Claudia snapped. You don't pressure staff into taking shortcuts just because you're good at mimicking entitlement. The words landed with a thud. Mimicking entitlement. Zara blinked slowly, absorbing the full weight of that phrasing. It wasn't just about a ticket anymore. It wasn't about system verification or protocol. It was about identity, the kind that Claudia assumed could be imitated, but not genuinely possessed. I wasn't mimicking anything, Zara said softly. I was born into it. Claudia bristled. See, that's the attitude I'm talking about. She waved a dismissive hand, then turned to Carlos. Keep an eye on her. I'll escalate this. Escalate to who? Zara asked. Claudia didn't answer. She simply walked off, typing furiously into her device. Carlos lingered for a moment, clearly uncomfortable. I'm sorry, he said under his breath. She's under pressure lately. Ever since the new audit system rolled in, she's been overly cautious. Caution is one thing, Zara murmured. Profiling is another. Carlos gave a nod, then retreated. Alone again, Zara looked around. A young boy across the corridor stared at her, curious. His mother tugged him away. A businessman nearby shifted uncomfortably and pulled out his laptop, avoiding eye contact. Another 5 minutes passed. Claudia didn't return. Zara checked her phone. A new message glowed on the screen from a contact, simply labeled Dad. It read, "Handled. Don't move. Someone will meet you there shortly." She looked up just in time to see a man in a charcoal suit with a platinum badge around his neck approaching from the far end of the terminal. The man in the charcoal suit didn't arrive with a dramatic flair, nor did he make his presence known with flashing credentials or sharp words. He moved with quiet authority, the kind that didn't need to be declared. His badge, however, said plenty: Operations Oversight Priority, Guest Division. He nodded at Zara and spoke with a low, professional tone. "Ms. Bennett?" She stood slowly, calmly. "Yes." Before anything more could be exchanged, Claudia returned, her expression carefully neutral. But there was a glint in her eyes, something guarded, something defensive. She immediately stepped between the man and Zara, as if trying to regain control of the space. "This guest status is under review," Claudia said tightly. "We're in the process of verifying her booking." The man turned to Claudia with a look that could have frozen glass. "I'm aware. I received a direct escalation from Mr. Bennett's executive liaison. We're proceeding differently now." Claudia hesitated, caught in a limbo between her authority and a chain of command she didn't fully comprehend. "I was just about to offer her an alternative," she muttered, tapping her tablet screen. "There's an open seat in economy. Row 31 aisle. If she wants to avoid delays, I can reassign her for a small fare difference. $80. Zara looked at Claudia without blinking. "You're offering to downgrade my first-class ticket?" Claudia smiled sweetly, falsely. "It's an option. Sometimes guests prefer to avoid conflict." "This is conflict?" Zara asked. "Or is this just the inconvenience of being questioned by someone who doesn't fit your passenger profile?" The man in the suit stepped back slightly, clearly opting not to intervene just yet. Claudia continued, her voice now dipped in that corporate politeness that often masked disdain. "No offense, but sometimes we encounter situations where passengers, for one reason or another, find themselves in places they didn't intend to be. It's better to give them options than have them feel misplaced." Zara's tone remained steady. "I'm not misplaced. I was exactly where I was supposed to be until you moved me." Claudia sighed and flipped the tablet toward Zara with a flourish, showing the available economy seat. "Row 31C. Aisle seat. Extra legroom. It's still a great experience, and, let's be honest, it's a more realistic fit. For someone your age. For someone who may not be used to luxury travel." The last sentence was delivered like a razor hidden in velvet, and it sliced exactly where Claudia intended it to. Zara didn't react outwardly. Her face didn't twitch. Her hands didn't tighten. But her silence filled the space more loudly than any argument could. "You're offering to sell me a lesser seat on a flight I already paid full fare for," she said. Claudia's response was a casual shrug, as if she were merely making a practical suggestion. "I'm offering you an out. No fuss. No delays. A smooth path forward." Zara finally let out a quiet breath, then shook her head. "No. I'll wait for the confirmation. From the people who actually know what they're doing." Claudia pursed her lips and smiled again, her tone mock gentle. "Suit yourself. Just understand that sometimes it's better not to insist on a place that doesn't quite suit you. Not everyone grows up in luxury, Ms. Bennett. And those who don't, they usually have trouble blending in when they try to return to it." The insult wasn't loud. It wasn't even angry. That's what made it sting harder. It was delivered like a universal truth, like a lesson passed down from someone who had earned the right to judge. Zara lifted her chin slightly and spoke with unshaken clarity. "You assume I haven't grown up in luxury, but that says more about you than it does about me." Claudia didn't respond. For a second, there was a flicker of something, discomfort, perhaps even doubt, but it vanished quickly behind the cool mask of policy. "Very well," she said. "I'll wait for the system update." The man in the suit, who had remained silent, finally took a small step forward. I'll handle the verification. Please don't make any further changes to her file." Claudia opened her mouth to object, but the look he gave her was final. She nodded stiffly, then moved aside, pretending to busy herself with another case. Zara sat back down slowly, her hand steady. Her phone lit up again, this time with another short message. 10 more minutes. Stay calm. They're coming. She didn't reply. There was no need. She had already decided long ago that no matter how many layers people like Claudia tried to put between her and her seat, she wasn't moving. Not for bureaucracy. Not for someone else's assumptions. Not for $80. Not for a lesser version of herself that someone else had decided she must be. A few feet away, a couple who had been quietly observing leaned closer to each other. "She's handling this better than I would," the woman whispered. "I'd be screaming by now." "That's probably what they want," the man replied. "Lose composure, get labeled difficult, get removed quietly." Zara heard none of it, but she felt every ounce of it, the way the terminal had become a spotlight, and she was the unwilling center of attention. Some people stared with sympathy, others with curiosity, a few with disdain, wondering what she must have done to be seated here, far from a lounge she'd been denied. But no one knew what Claudia had said behind closed doors. No one knew about the tablet screen and the $80 offer. No one heard the way the word realistic had been used like a knife. She was alone in that knowledge, and yet she was not shaken. Nearby, Claudia kept glancing back, watching her with a mixture of anticipation and unease, as if waiting for a misstep that never came. Zara stayed still, composed, waiting not for permission to belong, but for the system to catch up with who she already was. The tension in the boarding area had settled into a quiet standoff. Claudia stood to the side, her arms folded, tablet in hand, eyes occasionally drifting toward Zara with a look that suggested both calculation and irritation. The man from operations had moved on, called elsewhere before the verification was fully processed, leaving Claudia once again in physical proximity to her subject of scrutiny. Zara, for her part, remained seated near the economy check-in desk, posture steady, her phone untouched in her lap as her eyes followed the movements of everyone around her. She was observant, not reactive, just patient. And that patience, strangely, seemed to unsettle Claudia more than if she'd caused a scene. Nearby, Ellie, a junior flight attendant in her early 20s, was finalizing beverage inventory by the galley station near Gate B4. Though she wasn't directly involved in boarding, she had overheard bits of the situation during her rounds, and now she watched discreetly from across the counter. She had only joined the airline 9 months ago, full of excitement and idealism, drawn to the promise of professionalism and global exposure. But today, what she saw didn't quite match the company values she'd memorized during training. Claudia, standing near another gate agent, leaned in with a voice just low enough not to draw attention, but loud enough to ensure the message landed. "If we don't filter these things from the start," she said tightly, "all it takes is one person with an upgraded promo fare to throw off the entire first-class environment. That cabin is curated for a reason." The gate agent she spoke to, a quiet man named Terrence, nodded slowly but didn't meet her eyes. Claudia continued, clearly emboldened. "That girl? She walked in like she owned the place. No greeting, no hesitation. That's not normal for someone flying first on someone else's dime. Probably used some insider booking trick or award transfer loophole. Happens all the time with these so-called premium families who think they can get more than they pay for." Ellie's eyes flickered. She turned her body away, pretending to organize cups, but her hand reached for the crew terminal mounted behind the galley wall. Her fingers typed fast, heart picking up pace. She didn't like interfering, but she didn't like what she was hearing even more. Zara Bennett, that was the name. Ellie pulled up the passenger manifest for Flight 901. She scrolled to first class, found the Bennett Trust booking, and paused when she saw the line, account holder V. Bennett/authorized beneficiary. Z. Bennett. Status: Sapphire Executive. Mileage balance: 2,087,420 miles. Ellie stared. 2 million miles? That wasn't just loyalty. That was legendary. It was a tier she'd only seen referenced in high-level internal briefings, a classification so rare it was often considered fictional by lower-level employees. According to what she'd read, the Sapphire Executive tier was only granted to individuals who had spent over $500,000 in cumulative travel or whose corporate affiliations placed them within the top 0.01% of global clients. It wasn't a status someone stumbled into. It wasn't something bought on discount. Ellie felt her stomach tighten. Her training flashed through her mind. If you see something wrong, say something right. But who was she to question Claudia Harper, the longest tenured gate lead in this terminal? Claudia was known for her discipline, her sharpness, and, frankly, her ability to shut people down. She ran her zone with military precision. But still, Ellie turned slightly, glancing toward Zara, who remained silent, not once raising her voice, not once demanding anything. That was what struck Ellie the most. This wasn't entitlement. This was something else, something poised. Behind her, Claudia continued her quiet crusade. "I've seen this type before," she said to Terrence, shaking her head. "They act like they're owed something. Walk in, flash a name like Bennett, and expect everyone to roll out the red carpet. It's all posturing. But it breaks down when you ask for verification. Always does." Terrence made a vague sound in response, something between agreement and discomfort. Ellie felt her jaw set. She couldn't stay quiet. Not now. She tapped a few more keys and printed a verification slip from the terminal. A simplified readout of Zara's mileage account, tier, and booking verification. All standard, public-facing details that didn't require supervisor clearance. She slid the paper into her pocket and moved toward Claudia. "Hey," Ellie said, casual but steady. "Do you have a sec?" Claudia turned, surprised. "What's up?" Ellie didn't hesitate. "I just double-checked the manifest. That passenger, Zara Bennett, she's linked to a Sapphire Executive account. Over 2 million miles logged. Her father's name is Victor Bennett. I cross-referenced it with our internal brief. He's on the list of founding tier partners. That ticket wasn't transferred or upgraded. It was issued under priority authorization." Claudia's expression didn't change immediately, but her eyes did. A flicker of annoyance, or was it something closer to panic? "Why are you looking at that file?" she asked sharply. "You're not assigned to this gate." "I was verifying inventory and heard you mention her name," Ellie said evenly. "I thought maybe there was a booking glitch. But everything looks clean. Impeccable, actually." Claudia pressed her lips together. It's still not standard for someone that young to be traveling solo in first. With all the fraud cases lately, we have to be careful. Ellie nodded slowly, not arguing. "Totally agree. But careful and biased aren't the same thing." Claudia took a step closer. "You think I'm biased?" Ellie didn't flinch. "I think we all have blind spots. I just don't want this to become something it doesn't need to be." For a beat, Claudia said nothing. Then she looked past Ellie, toward Zara, and without another word turned sharply back to her terminal. Ellie remained where she stood, uncertain if she'd helped or only escalated. Either way, she'd done what felt right. She returned to her post, heart still pounding, unsure whether Claudia would retaliate, or whether this would reach someone even higher. Zara, from her seat, had noticed the exchange. She hadn't heard the words, but she'd seen the tension. The folded paper in Ellie's pocket. The way Claudia now avoided her gaze entirely. Something had shifted. Not enough to resolve everything, but enough to tilt the axis slightly. 10 rows away, a supervisor's intercom crackled to life with a quiet buzz. Zara's boarding group still hadn't been called. The moment of tension that had been building for nearly an hour finally fractured when Claudia's voice sliced through the low hum of the terminal. Her tone, louder than before, rose above the background chatter, catching the attention of nearby passengers like the sudden snap of a microphone during a silent speech. "I don't care who your father is," she declared, standing directly in front of Zara, her arms crossed, chin tilted slightly upward in a posture that screamed control. "This isn't about family names or fancy bank accounts. In this terminal, we serve those who actually pay for their tickets, not those who throw around someone else's reputation just to look important." Conversations nearby paused. Several passengers turned subtly, while others didn't even bother to hide their interest. One woman removed an earbud. A man in a tailored suit halfway through typing on his phone stopped mid-text. There was a shift in the air, a collective acknowledgement that something personal had now gone public. Zara didn't stand. She didn't flinch. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but precise, cutting through the moment not with volume, but with clarity. "If you're still unsure, I'd recommend contacting someone from upper-level operations," she said. "They can verify the booking in less than a minute." Claudia laughed, not kindly. "Upper-level operations?" she echoed, her mouth pulling into a smirk. "Sweetheart, I am upper-level operations. I run this gate. I sign off every single premium check-in for this terminal. You think you can walk in here, drop a big name, and that makes rules disappear?" Zara tilted her head slightly. "No, I think it means you're afraid of being wrong." Claudia's expression tightened. "Wrong," she repeated sharply. "I've been doing this for 15 years. I know the difference between someone who belongs in first class and someone trying to sneak their way into it. And believe me, you don't belong. Not here. Not today." From across the hall, Ellie winced. She could feel the heat of embarrassment rising for everyone involved. She wasn't the only one. Passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to watch or look away. This wasn't some minor delay anymore. It had become an open display of authority being weaponized, with Claudia trying to anchor herself in dominance, and Zara refusing to be moved by anything but facts. Claudia wasn't done. "Let me be perfectly clear," she said, raising her voice once more as if addressing a courtroom. "It doesn't matter how much money your daddy has. He could own a hotel chain, a sports team, or whatever else rich people collect. But unless he bought this seat using your name and you meet our identification standards, you're not stepping foot into that first-class cabin. Because in this airport, money doesn't override policy." Zara's fingers were interlaced on her lap, unmoving. "He did buy the seat," she said. "In my name, through a verified concierge account that your own system recognized 40 minutes ago. You just didn't bother to look." Claudia scoffed. "You think you're the first person to say that? Every other week someone walks up here claiming they're connected to someone on our donor list, or someone who owns a private terminal in Dubai. They bring printed screenshots, badges, you name it. But if I let every one of them through, the people who actually pay and follow protocol wouldn't feel safe. My job is to protect the experience." "The experience of who?" Zara asked softly. "The ones you approve of?" Claudia blinked, stunned for a half-second that the question was so direct. Her silence lasted just long enough for a nearby man in a business suit to mutter under his breath, "She's got a point." Claudia's head snapped in his direction, but he quickly looked away, pretending to check his boarding pass. Ellie, from her post, felt something shift in her chest. It wasn't just anger. It was recognition. Recognition that Claudia wasn't just enforcing policy. She was enforcing perception. She wasn't trying to confirm identity. She was trying to maintain an illusion of control, of exclusivity, of knowing exactly what a first-class passenger should look like. And right now, Zara didn't fit that image. Claudia tapped furiously into her tablet, murmuring to herself about auditing protocols and internal trust conflicts, but her fingers hesitated. The data didn't lie. Zara's booking had been authenticated. Her tier status was legitimate. The issue was no longer technical. It was psychological. "Look," Claudia said finally, voice still raised, "if your father wants to make a scene, he can do that. But you don't get to sit there acting like some silent princess, expecting the world to bend around you. I'm not the one confused about how this works. You are." Zara stood now, slowly and with purpose, meeting Claudia's glare directly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You're right," she said. "You've been doing this for 15 years. And it shows. You've built a system around deciding who belongs where, and you're terrified that someone who doesn't fit your checklist can walk through your line and belong anyway. I get it. That must be uncomfortable." Claudia's nostrils flared. "Don't patronize me," she snapped. "I'm not," Zara replied. "I'm just pointing out that your issue isn't my seat. It's that you didn't put me in it. Gasps weren't audible, but the shift in posture across several onlookers told the story. Shoulders straightened, heads turned. Someone near the window sipped their coffee slower, their eyes fixed on the exchange. A voice crackled faintly over the intercom, announcing the final boarding call for a different flight. But in this space, nothing else mattered. Claudia's authority had started to fracture, not from being challenged by force, but from being unraveled by truth. She held her ground, but it was becoming clear the ground itself was less stable than she believed. Her eyes darted toward the operations terminal across the gate, where a second figure was now approaching, one with a gold badge and a navy blue suit. Zara didn't move immediately. She stood facing Claudia, poised, her face unreadable, her breath calm despite the weight of the moment. The energy in the terminal had shifted imperceptibly to some, but to others, those paying attention, it was electric. She reached into her blazer pocket, pulled out her phone, and held it for a second in her palm. Her thumb hovered over one specific contact marked simply as Dad, and with a single press, the line began to ring. The device remained by her side, barely lifted to ear level. "Hi, it's me," she said softly, her voice low enough that only Claudia, standing just a step away, could hear clearly. "They're asking for verification. I haven't been allowed to board. I think I'm going to need help getting on the plane in time." She didn't argue, didn't raise her voice, didn't explain further. She simply paused, nodded to whatever response came through the earpiece, then murmured, "Okay, I'll wait right here," before ending the call with one tap and slipping the phone back into her pocket as if nothing had happened. Claudia exhaled sharply, arms crossed, face flushed from a mix of irritation and something edging dangerously close to uncertainty. "So now what?" she asked sarcastically. "We're supposed to stop the entire airport because you made a phone call." Zara said nothing. She returned to her seat with the same composure she'd shown all morning, crossing one leg over the other, her eyes calmly observing the gate monitors flickering above her. For exactly 30 seconds, nothing changed. The boarding announcements continued for nearby gates. The ambient noise of the airport resumed its usual rhythm, and Claudia allowed herself to believe that perhaps the moment had passed, that no one was coming, that the silence following Zara's call had meant nothing. And then, the phone on the gate terminal rang. It didn't ring like a normal call. It rang with a double-tone pattern reserved only for internal tier-level emergencies, the kind that most staff only ever heard during drills or executive briefings. Claudia froze. The lead supervisor on duty, Mark Felder, a man usually composed to the point of robotic stillness, reached across the desk to answer the line, his fingers twitching slightly as he pulled the handset to his ear. "This is Gate 6, he said, eyes on his screen. The voice on the other end spoke just 3 sentences. Mark's spine straightened as his eyes flicked to the name on the active manifest. He didn't speak again, only nodded and hung up the phone, then turned toward Claudia with the color visibly draining from his face. "Claudia," he said quietly, urgently, "you need to step aside. Immediately." Claudia blinked. "Excuse me." "You are currently detaining a passenger listed on the Sapphire Black Registry," Mark said, each word slow and deliberate, as if speaking to someone who had just stepped into traffic. "That's Victor Bennett's daughter. She's authorized under direct executive oversight." Her name was flagged the moment she used her priority contact line. Claudia's lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. She glanced toward Zara, who remained seated, unfazed, her hands still folded gently in her lap. "No one told me," Claudia began. "It's not your job to be told," Mark interrupted, his tone uncharacteristically sharp. "Those bookings are not disclosed to frontline staff unless accessed through the override tier log, which, as I'm now seeing, you never initiated. You acted on assumption." "I was trying to follow protocol," Claudia insisted, suddenly flushed, her voice tight. "I didn't see any notes." Her name wasn't linked directly to the Bennett executive file. "Because it never is," Mark snapped. "That's the entire point of Sapphire Black status. Discretion, security, and rapid mobilization. Her verification is encrypted until requested by command. You weren't authorized to question it." Passengers nearby were now openly staring, picking up on the tone and tension of the moment. Claudia's shoulders stiffened, her eyes darting between Zara and Mark. "I didn't know, but you treated her like you did," Mark said. "And now we're fielding a call from executive operations. You need to stand down before you make this worse." Claudia took a step back, her composure faltering as she reached for the edge of the desk, gripping it like a lifeline. Her eyes moved back to Zara, who finally rose from her seat slowly, with the same precision she had carried all morning. She walked toward them, not hurriedly, not triumphantly, just deliberately. Claudia opened her mouth again, perhaps to apologize or perhaps to reclaim control. But Zara's gaze stopped her before a word could form. "You made your decision," Zara said calmly. "Now let them make theirs." Mark turned to Zara with professional courtesy restored. "Ms. Bennett, your boarding has been reinstated. We've arranged direct escort through the jet bridge. No delays from this point forward." "Thank you," she said simply. "I'll walk." Claudia turned away, blinking rapidly, her hands still gripping the desk edge. The terminal seemed too quiet now, the buzz dulled by the weight of realization crashing down on everyone within earshot. Ellie, from the galley station, watched the entire thing unfold, her heart pounding. She knew this wasn't over. That fallout always came later, but what she had just witnessed wasn't something easily erased or excused. The name Bennett was no longer just a reference in a profile. It was a living, breathing presence, and Claudia had not just disrespected the daughter of one of the airline's most influential figures. She had done it publicly, proudly, and without evidence. Mark picked up the desk phone again, his voice hushed now as he dialed another extension. Claudia remained where she stood, her face pale, her shoulders locked in a rigid posture of denial. In the distance, the sound of wheels from a rolling carry-on bag broke the silence. Zara had begun walking toward the boarding gate, her back straight, her steps unshaken. Zara's footsteps echoed softly against the polished floor of the private corridor as she moved with quiet confidence toward the now-cleared gate. She passed a line of ground crew members who had abruptly stepped aside the moment her name was confirmed, their body language a mixture of apology and deference. Claudia, meanwhile, stood frozen near the terminal's rear desk, her badge now in the trembling grip of a shift supervisor who had just been instructed, via secure call, to place her on immediate operational hold. Mark didn't make eye contact with her. He didn't have to. His clipped words were enough. "Claudia Harper, your gate privileges are suspended pending an internal inquiry. Please surrender your clearance tag and await instruction from Human Resources." Claudia's face had lost all color, her lips pressed together in a tight, shaking line as she slowly removed the laminated badge from her lanyard and handed it over, without a word. Her eyes darted toward Zara, who was being met now by a tall woman in a sleek navy blue uniform bearing a Platinum Executive Division insignia over her breast pocket. "Ms. Bennett," the woman greeted, offering a polite nod. "We've arranged for direct escort. The chairman's office has activated your priority lane. If you prefer, we can bring the vehicle to the jet bridge exit, or I'd prefer to walk," Zara replied gently. "Thank you." The woman gave a small, understanding smile and stepped aside, allowing Zara to continue forward. But before she did, she turned briefly and looked back, not to gloat, not to humiliate, but to meet Claudia's eyes one last time. The look wasn't angry. It wasn't triumphant. It was simply a reflection of clarity, the calm certainty of someone who no longer needed to prove anything. Claudia blinked first. Outside on the tarmac, a matte black transport cart, reserved strictly for diplomatic or ultra-VIP transport, was parked beside a discreet access ramp leading to Gate SAXS auxiliary boarding door. Few passengers even knew this entrance existed. Even fewer had ever used it. A single crew member stood at attention beside the cart, a headset in one ear and a tablet in his hand, already logged into a restricted access manifest with only one name on it: Z. Bennett. Inside the operations suite, just off the concourse, a different conversation was unfolding. Director Ethan Moreland, one of the most senior airline executives on the West Coast, stood at the head of a small conference table, speaking quietly into a secure line routed directly to headquarters. "Yes," he said, glancing at the clock on the wall. "She's already in motion." No further delay. They've confirmed the error originated from improper tier access and unauthorized intervention. The file has been pulled. I'll submit the full report before the end of the day." He paused, listened, then added, "Yes. She's carrying a chairman-class credential. No, not a proxy. The original, registered under Victor Bennett's master tier. Sapphire black, with irrevocable boarding privileges." A murmur rose from one of the staff members sitting nearby, barely audible. "There are only 3 of those tickets in circulation," Moreland nodded, covering the mouthpiece. "And one of them is hers." The line ended with a curt confirmation, and Moreland stepped into the hallway just as Zara was reaching the top of the ramp. He raised a hand gently. "Ms. Bennett," he said with quiet professionalism, "on behalf of the entire executive team, allow me to personally apologize for what you experienced this morning." Zara paused, meeting his eyes. "I appreciate that," she replied calmly, "but I hope you understand that apologies don't undo assumptions." Moreland nodded once, visibly chastened. "Understood. I can assure you that an immediate audit has been launched. No one with your credentials should ever be subject to anything less than the highest tier of discretion and respect. This incident will be addressed with full transparency." Zara nodded and stepped forward, accepting his statement but not needing further validation. The hallway ahead opened into a sealed VIP jet bridge, a space completely cut off from the standard passenger path. The walls were lined with cream leather panels, polished brass trim, and soft lighting, designed not for function, but for quiet exclusivity. Zara moved through it without slowing, each step smooth and unburdened, her phone now back in her hand, but still locked, her gaze forward. Behind her, murmurs spread like ripples across the concourse. The passengers, who had been watching, began whispering among themselves. Words like priority clearance, founders list, and internal override floated from mouth to mouth, half understood and half embellished. Ellie stood near the galley, still holding the printout from earlier, which now felt like a piece of history. She looked at Claudia, who had sunk into the nearest support chair, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, as if her body had finally registered what her ego had refused to accept. The truth wasn't just that she had made a mistake. It was that she had tried to dominate someone untouchable, and lost everything in the process. In the control room, Mark entered a final note into the incident log. Under the line labeled passenger response, he wrote, "Maintain composure throughout. Offered no resistance. Initiated chain of command verification only when necessary. Under staff conduct, he typed, escalated unnecessarily. Acted outside system protocol. Interfered with tier-protected booking." His fingers hovered over the last entry, immediate recommendation. He paused, then entered, full suspension pending review. As the plane doors opened silently to receive their VIP passenger, the final boarding group for Flight 901 stood waiting nearby, unaware that the entire flight had been held back 3 minutes, just long enough for one person to board through a door only 3 people in the country had access to. The flight attendants inside the cabin had been notified moments prior. A special seat had already been prepped in row 1A, leather cleaned, champagne pre-chilled, name placard gently placed on the headrest. The overhead bin above the seat had been cleared entirely, a small folded cloth placed inside with the logo of the airline's founding family stitched in platinum thread. The seating manifest didn't list a name, only the code, BB3, unblockable access. As the escort at the end of the jet bridge keyed in a 6-digit override code and scanned the embedded chip in Zara's boarding pass, the private cabin door eased open ahead of her. The administrative hearing took place 3 days after the incident, behind closed doors on the 6th floor of the airline's regional headquarters, in a room usually reserved for strategic planning sessions and performance reviews. On this occasion, however, the atmosphere was far from routine. The panel consisted of 5 senior executives, 2 external ethics consultants, and 1 representative from the airline's Diversity and Inclusion Board, all seated in a semicircle of chrome chairs facing a single table at the center of the room. At that table sat Claudia Harper, her posture stiff, hands folded neatly in front of her, though her eyes carried the weight of someone who already knew the outcome but still clung to the illusion of defense. The internal review team had spent 72 hours combing through flight logs, passenger complaints, and gate surveillance footage. What they discovered wasn't just one isolated error. It was a pattern. Over the course of 2 years, Claudia had been the subject of 6 formal complaints related to discriminatory behavior. None overt, none loud, but all consistent. Passengers described feeling singled out, scrutinized, and quietly redirected despite holding valid boarding passes. Several noted that when challenged, Claudia often cited vague procedural language or claimed the system had glitched. None of those cases had ever reached formal disciplinary action. Until now. At the head of the panel, Director Ethan Moreland began the proceedings without flourish. "Ms. Harper," he said, "this session has been convened to review the incident involving passenger Zara Bennett on Flight 901, as well as to assess a broader trend of conduct under your role as Senior Gate Supervisor. You've had an exemplary record in operations performance metrics, but the nature of today's discussion pertains to values, not efficiency." Claudia's response was measured. "I understand, and I take full responsibility for my actions on that day. However, I would like to note that my decisions were based on passenger verification inconsistencies. I was unaware of Ms. Bennett's tier status due to a lack of system access at the time." Moreland leaned forward slightly. "Ms. Harper, are you aware that Sapphire Black status is not meant to be verified by frontline personnel unless prompted by command override?" Claudia nodded. "I am now. And were you aware," he continued, "that the ticket held by Ms. Bennett was one of only 3 executive priority credentials issued directly from the chairman's office, categorized as non-modifiable, non-transferable, and immune to downgrade?" Claudia hesitated. "No, I wasn't given that information." "That's precisely the point," interjected Maria Soto, the ethics advisor. "You weren't given the information because the system is designed to conceal it. These tickets exist for passengers who require discretion and protection. The problem isn't that you didn't know who she was. It's that you assumed who she wasn't." The room fell quiet for a beat. Claudia blinked. She wanted to argue. She wanted to say that she was under pressure, that she had dealt with fraud cases before, that she wasn't trying to be malicious. But none of those words felt right anymore. She'd spent her entire career believing she could read people, identify the real from the fake, the eligible from the entitled. But in this case, her instincts hadn't just failed her. They had exposed her. The committee moved to the report summary. Slides appeared on the screen behind them, listing prior cases. Flight 244, passenger reseated after being questioned on upgrade legitimacy. Flight 387, delay in boarding after ID was visually questioned. Flight 650, challenge to ticket status despite confirmed reservation. All incidents were logged under Claudia's ID. Most victims were passengers of color. The patterns were impossible to dismiss. Dr. Reza Amin, the external consultant, cleared his throat. "Ms. Harper, we reviewed your response logs and found repeated use of language, such as they didn't look the part. And someone must have booked for them. Can you explain the intent behind that phrasing?" Claudia swallowed hard. At the time, I didn't think those words were harmful. I meant them in reference to behavior, not appearance." "And yet," Dr. Amin replied, "they were consistently directed at individuals from non-white backgrounds. Unconscious bias is not an excuse. It's a responsibility. And, in your position, that responsibility has been mishandled." There was no dramatic climax, no gavel pounding the table. The decision was delivered plainly. Claudia Harper would be removed from her current post indefinitely. All executive gate access, override privileges, and mentorship designations were rescinded. She would be reassigned to a lower capacity operations role, subject to reevaluation following the completion of a mandatory 12-week bias correction and cultural retraining program, administered independently through the Victor Bennett Foundation. Claudia flinched at the name. Of course it would be his foundation. The man whose daughter had calmly, surgically dismantled her false sense of authority now had a hand in her redemption, or her reckoning. The irony was bitter, but not undeserved. The program, as explained by Moreland, included immersive case studies, bias recognition diagnostics, one-on-one coaching, and simulated gate interactions led by DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion experts. Participation wasn't optional. Completion wouldn't guarantee reinstatement. And the final report from the foundation would determine whether Claudia would be allowed to work in any public-facing capacity again. "I understand," Claudia said finally, her voice hoarse. "I accept the consequences." But inside her mind spun, not from rage or disbelief, but from something she hadn't felt in years: doubt. Doubt in the image she had built of herself. Doubt in the systems she had sworn by. Doubt in the instincts that had once made her a respected name in gate operations, and now had left her stripped of everything. When the hearing ended, Claudia stood, nodded once to the panel, and walked out of the room. No one followed. No one spoke. She exited through the back corridor, away from the bustling terminals she once commanded, her steps echoing against the linoleum like the final notes of a performance long overdue for revision. In the lounge reserved for the training cohort, her name was already printed on the list under a new designation: participant number 473, Harper, C. Bias Awareness Track. She would report the following Monday. Victor Bennett had personally signed off on the funding for the cohort's expansion just that morning. The conference room on the 4th floor of the Bennett Foundation's training center bore no resemblance to an airline operations hub. There were no terminals, no boarding calls, no high heels echoing across glass tiles. Instead, it smelled faintly of lavender oil diffused in the corner, and soft instrumental jazz played low beneath the buzz of overhead lights. Foldable chairs were arranged in a circle, and a whiteboard displayed the words Bias Reflection Workshop Week 11, The Mirror Within. Claudia Harper sat in the third seat from the left, hands folded over a navy spiral-bound notebook that bore the initials of the foundation, the pages filled with reflections, regrets, and realizations that had built slowly over the past 11 sessions. To her left sat a first-year intern from the flight crew scheduling team. To her right, a janitorial supervisor from a regional terminal. No ranks, no hierarchy, just stories. Some of fear, others of shame, but all of them real. Claudia hadn't spoken much in the first few weeks. She'd arrived rigid, defensive, often scribbling notes instead of engaging. But over time, something began to shift. It wasn't during the lectures or even the role-play simulations. It was in the silent moments, when someone else spoke of being humiliated at a gate or mistaken for a baggage handler despite holding a first-class ticket, that Claudia began to realize her own voice had once been the one creating those moments. She thought of Zara often, not because of the consequences, but because of the way the girl had never once raised her voice. That quiet grace had haunted her more than any shouting match would have. It was humbling, because it had exposed not just her behavior, but the pride behind it. Today's discussion focused on how unchecked assumptions perpetuate structural inequality, even when cloaked as professionalism. When the instructor, a calm-spoken woman named Dr. Lila Matthews, invited the group to reflect aloud, Claudia surprised everyone by raising her hand. She didn't stand. She didn't need to. "I used to think money was what made people arrogant," she began, her voice steady but raw. "But sitting here, I realized that I wasn't reacting to wealth. I was reacting to the fear that someone who didn't fit my picture of status might outrank me. And the truth is, money doesn't make people condescending. It just makes the pride of small minds easier to see. The real arrogance, the kind I lived in, was believing my judgment was enough to define someone else's place." The room was still, not silent in tension, but quiet in acknowledgement. No one clapped. No one needed to. It wasn't a performance. It was a reckoning. Later that afternoon, the final guest speaker of the course arrived, stepping quietly into the room with minimal attention. She wore no name tag, no entourage, no performance-ready smile. She simply entered with a folder in one hand and a bottle of water in the other. Zara Bennett. Some of the participants recognized her immediately from internal bulletins about the incident. Others had heard only fragments of the story. But for Claudia, the presence of the young woman she had tried to discredit, now standing at the front of the room, felt like the final stage of a long and necessary sentence. Zara didn't address the incident directly. Instead, she spoke about her experience growing up adjacent to wealth but not defined by it, and how often people assumed her place in the world was an inheritance rather than a right. She talked about dignity, the kind that isn't tied to status, but to how one treats others when no one is watching. She spoke about her father, too, not in terms of power or position, but as a man who taught her that respect should never be demanded, only offered, and only after it's been lived. She closed her folder and said, "Sometimes, the hardest person to convince of your worth is the one trained to overlook you." After a soft round of questions and comments, the instructor invited anyone in the circle to share final thoughts. Claudia didn't hesitate this time. She stood slowly, not ceremoniously, and turned to Zara with a gaze that no longer held fear or guilt, only ownership. "You didn't humiliate me," she said quietly. "You didn't report me to the press. You didn't ask for punishment. But you did something far worse for me. You stayed calm. You held your ground. You let me see myself clearly. And that's a gift I didn't know I needed." She paused, swallowing, then added, "Thank you for not getting me fired. Thank you for letting me learn, instead, how to be someone who deserves to wear a badge again. Not because of seniority, but because I've finally earned it." Zara gave a small nod, accepting the words without judgment. The room exhaled, not in relief, but in understanding. Outside the window, planes lifted from the runway, their shadows sweeping across the training center's concrete walls, each one a silent metaphor for departure and return. Inside, a former gate agent who once believed she controlled who belonged had just learned the most powerful truth of all. It's not our job to decide who's worthy. It's our job to recognize when we've stopped seeing people as people. And sometimes, the first ticket back to humanity is the one that humbles us the most. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss the next twist. Which moment hit you the hardest? And what would you have done if you were in Zara's shoes? And one more thing, we'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your thoughts and your location in the comments. Your voice makes this journey bigger than just one story.